up high.
Hey, howdy, hey, inhabitants of Oz that are hoping to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz, using quotation marks because he's not always wonderful, according to some adaptations. Wolfman Forward Dash here. So, in the 1900s, sort of like way at the beginning of the 1900s, an author by the name of L. Frank Baum, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, created the book series, which is simply known as the Oz book series of books, but most of you will know the first story, which is of course The Wizard of Oz, or in some adaptations and publications, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It's one of those stories that's been adapted a lot. Most of you will be familiar with the MGM/Warner Brothers film from 1939, which I will talk about in this video. A lot more of you will be familiar with its attempts by the two Wicked films and obviously the stage production of the same name. To establish the origins and sort of settings and everything for Oz that would then lead into obviously Wizard of Oz. So, having watched the most recent Oz film, which is obviously Wicked for Good, I thought it was time to talk about the various films and TV shows that I've seen that's to do with the franchise at large. The franchise is not really owned by any sort of sole company, because some companies own the rights to some things, others own the rights to other things, but on the whole, I believe it actually says here on Wikipedia that it is in public domain. It's just that the various adaptations obviously do belong to their respective studios, which we'll get around at some point in this video, but I may as well sum up. So, Warner Brothers own the rights to the original 1939 film that MGM originally did. Universal hold the rights to the Wicked to anything to do with Wicked, and Disney obviously hold the rights to their own adaptations of the films that they did, even though they originally wanted to have Oz themselves, but they ultimately didn't get that in the end. So, all that aside, let's now talk about the different adaptations that I've seen. I'm not going to go through every single adaptation because I've not had time to play the video games. I've not had time to read the books. I had more time to watch the films and the TV shows, and there's obviously some films and TV shows that I will be missing out because, for various reasons, with the main reasons being that they costed money and I didn't want to spend too much money on something I was going to see probably only once in my life and then move on to something else. Or they were just unavailable. So those of you that are hoping to hear my opinion of the Muppets Wizard of Oz, unfortunately it's not going to happen because I couldn't get access to it, unfortunately. And I don't even know where I can watch it actually, because I just couldn't find it. And also with these sort of very low budget kind of adaptations I've seen on various streaming platforms while watching all the stuff, there's like so many that are quite bad. So but anyway. So let's kick things off with the film from 1910. So Wonderful Wizard of Oz, also known as The Wizard of Oz. It was released in 1910. It's an American silent fantasy film and the earliest surviving version of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It was made by the Selig Polyscope Company without input from the author. So boo. And it was created to fulfill a contractual obligation associated with Baum's personal bankruptcy caused by the failure of his theatrical production, which was the Fairy Log and radio plays, which I would have also talked about in this video, but again I didn't want to spend too much time on every single thing because there's so much. So yeah. Anyway, so I saw this on the internet, and because of how old it is, it's obviously best to be played with sort of classical folk kind of music, because usually silent films work better if you have like little music to go with it, but you do have to pay a lot of attention to the silent films. And if they don't have any music but you still get the picture, then I mean that does kind of is the purpose of silent films. It has to be completely silent, but yeah, music does kind of help you feel more engaged, I guess. But anyway, so 1910 film, Yeah, I didn't pay too much attention to this, I'll admit. But from what I saw, it was okay. I think you can certainly get engaged with it, and the costumes look nice, and all the mad craziness that goes on in it was good. It's just a shame that there wasn't that because of when it was released that they couldn't get any sound effects, dialogue, or whatever until later on in the world. So yeah, so I'm gonna give the Wonderful As Was, the 1910 film. I'm gonna be fair to it. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10 because it is a silent film. It is also the earliest surviving film version of the Wizard of Oz. So a 6 I think is worth it. If you're into silent films, you'll enjoy it fine. If you're not, then you're not missing much. Best to skip, basically. So yeah. So next we have The Patchwork Girl of Oz, which was released in 1914 and is once again a silent film. This time with the author L. Frank Baum involved through his company, the Oz Film Manufacturing Company, and it's based on the 1913 book The Patchwork Girl of Oz. This one, it definitely, when you go a film that's adapted, that's by the author himself, it's either a good sign or a bad sign. Now, the reason I say this is because, as anyone who knows when watching Fantastic Beasts or any of Stephen King's mini series, you'll know that if the author takes too much control, they tend to do this thing where they throw every single scene that they want from the book and try and adapt as the entire book, but then the rest of us sort of realise that not everything translates well to screen, which is unfortunately the problem with lots of books, that it's not possible to adapt everything to screen, and some things need to be made sense for it to work. And that's the reason why the Harry Potter films, they don't all follow the books exactly. And although Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, you could say, does follow the books exactly, but because Peter Jackson likes extending stuff, he just wants to throw in as much content as possible. But anyway, Patchwork Girl of Oz, I kind of understand and get it. There's not really much to say about it. It's just about a character that's a patchwork girl. But once again, just like with the previous silent film, it does have music to it, it looked fun. Dancing, fancy free, and everything. So yeah, but to be honest, wasn't really that engaged with it, so I'm gonna also give it a 6 out of 10. Moving us on to the next film, which is The Magic Cloak of Oz, also released in 1914, directed by J. Farrell MacDonald, written by the author himself, and produced by him and composer Louis F. Gottschalk. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing those names right. It's an adaptation of his novel Queen Zixi of Ix, which I'm just going to double check as I'm going through this if this is part of his series, and it is, although it's not a very well known book from what I recall. So I watched this on the internet, and unfortunately it's a silent film that is as silent as you can get, so no music this time, it's just silent. And yeah, you kind of sort of get bored with it quite quickly if it's like literally silent as it makes out to be. But what it is, it was all right for what it was, and it was also the final Oz production released during Frank Baum's lifetime before his death in 1919. So good that he was able to at least see 3 films based on his work be made, even though the second and third films were ones that he himself was directly involved in. So yeah, I think I do kind of like this one, not kind of on par with the other two, only because it's more of the same really, just people dancing around, fantasy free and everything, and it does have some good stuff to it. It's just a shame that there's no music, because if you don't have music, you're not going to get all that engaged. So unfortunately, I'm going to give it a slightly lower rating of a 5 out of 10. So that's that one. Next is His Majesty the Scarecrow of Oz, also released in 1914. It's an American silent fantasy adventure film, directed once again by J. Farrell MacDonald, and written and produced by Frank Baum, presumably before he died. So people that star in it include Violet Macmillan, Frank Moore, Vivian Reed, Todd Wright, Paris Kudrick, Raymond Russell, and Fred Woodward. Apparently had a troubled history during distribution. Opened on September 20 on the 20th of September 1914. I am British, not American, so therefore it's day, month, year. Just to be clear. It had little success, though it was received as well as above average by fans. Blah 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 blah. You get the idea with that. So yeah, this one I thought was all right. It once again didn't have any music, but it's got a bit of a story to it this time. So it's about this king who's a cruel dictator in the Emerald City in the Land of Oz. Wants to marry him off his niece. Blah blah blah. Things happen, transpires, and everything. And yeah, it's pretty much probably the only film out of the few silent films where there actually is some kind of plot to it, and it's not just people dancing around fancy free and everything. So yeah, so on that basis, I'm going to give His Majesty the Scarecrow of Oz, the film that is, not actually the Scarecrow of Oz, the 7 out of 10, even though there's not much music to it, or any for that matter. Or well, maybe there was, I can't remember. So yeah, anyway. Next is The Wizard of Oz from 1925. So again, another silent fantasy adventure comedy film. This time directed by Larry Seaman, who had the lead role of a Kansas farmhand and was later disguised as the Scarecrow. The production stars an actual person called Dorothy Dawn as Dorothy, Oliver Hardy as the Tin Woodman, and I'm just going to double check if that is the same Oliver Hardy from Oliver Hardy, and it is. Hooray! Someone I know, and he plays the Tin Woodman, and to be honest, I think I couldn't think of any better role for him. And Curtis McHenry, briefly disguised as a lion, is the only completed 1920s adaptation of Frank Baum's 1900 novel The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and less well known than a certain other film which we'll get to a little bit later on. But you know, it's a great achievement that after a few films they finally got a film that adapts the entire story from beginning to end, and I think that is an amazing achievement for them to have. And the thing is, I've kind of enjoyed this one a lot because obviously one of my all-time favourite comedy legends, Oliver Hardy, is in it. For those who don't know, he's one half of the Laurel and Hardy double act. Look him up if you don't know who he is. I'll be incredibly surprised if you don't know who he is. And I enjoyed this one a lot. I can't remember if it had any music to it, but I certainly did enjoy it a lot more, and I think it was good that they finally adapted the whole story, even though this one is probably the lesser known version of the story. But obviously it's the same basic story. Dorothy lands in Oz, meets the Cowardly Lion, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Man, not in that order. Goes to see the wizard. Wizard tells them to be up the witch. Blah blah blah. You get the idea with that. And unlike the MGM film, they do adapt a little bit more from the book than the MGM film did. So I'll give it that, as well as doing its own original ideas as well. But anyway, so I'm going to give the 1925 film a 7 out of 10. Now we come to the first, as I understand it, the first animated version of the story, which is The Wizard of Oz from 1933. So this one was an animated short and was a Canadian and American production, directed by Ted Eschbar. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And the animation is very reminiscent of the old Looney Tunes and Silly Symphonies cartoons from Warner Brothers and Disney, respectfully. And you know, during the times where you could pretty much get away with anything and everything, unlike today, where you're very limited to what things you can get away with. In a sense that you can probably verbally say it and get away with it to some extent, but actually showing it, you can't get away with it, unfortunately. So yeah, but that's probably for the best. So the 1933 film, simple, straightforward. It's It's a short story, and it's, to the best of my knowledge, it doesn't really follow the story or at all, really. Or actually, no, it does. Sorry, I'm just reading the plot. Yeah, it does follow the story a little bit. But yeah, if you like Looney Tunes and silly symphonies, merry melodies, and all that jazz, then you'll definitely enjoy this little animated short of the Wizard of Oz. It's not as well known as the other one, which we're going to talk about in a little while, but it's still sort of charming and pleasant to look at, and actually has sound effects and music. But I don't think it's got voices, but it definitely has those. So I'm going to give the 1933 film I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, because I actually did enjoy it a lot, so yeah. Alright, now it's time for the big one. The one that you all know, and the one that's made its debut in the Sphere late last year. So for those who don't know, the Sphere is a big sort of experience kind of cinema where you can look all around you and everything. But yeah, so obviously this is The Wizard of Oz from 1939. Produced by MGM. You all know the story, you all know the songs, you all know how it is, and it's kind of one of those films that's sort of celebrated by the advancements in technology at the time. So if you've never seen the film, I'll give you a brief summary. It's very much the first book adapted to screen. You pretty much all know it very well. I'd be surprised if there's not many of you who watch my videos that don't know it at all. And it's very well presented, very colourful. Apart from the Kansas scenes, which are as black and white and beige as you can get, and it's great that they sort of take advantage of that and sort of make Kansas look black and white and beige, but then as soon as you enter Oz, it becomes very colourful, and they actually go full on with the colour. So the Yellow Brick Road is very much as yellow as you can get, Emerald City is as green as you can get. All the characters are as colourful as you can get, and colourful by I mean actually literally colourful, not colourful as in they have colourful personalities. I think everyone plays their parts really well. I enjoyed the songs. All the stuff that happens. It is the sort of film that did set the foundation for what was to come afterwards, with all the different adaptations of the Oz stuff that came afterwards. And I think it's a really well made film. However, I cannot get over the fact that there was at least one, maybe two moments in the film where, if you pay close attention, there is actually stuff that did happen behind the scenes, which unfortunately I can't get over. But apart from that, I think it's a very well made film, and I think it definitely deserved to be loved and cherished and celebrated as it has been to this day. So apart from the thing that happened behind the scenes, I'm going to give The Wizard of Oz, the 1939 film, a 9 out of 10. We're not finished there yet. We've still got loads more to do. So next up is The Wiz. Yeah, go have a whiz, why don't you? Anyway, so The Wiz it was originally a Broadway musical from 1974, and it was basically a version of The Wizard of Oz, but in a sort of Motown Harlem kind of feel to it. So there's a lot of and I'm sorry, I'm going to sound racist when I say this, so I do apologise. So there's a lot of people of colour in the film. And it's pretty much the almost the exact same story, just in a sort of, but Oz looks like very sort of urban Motown Harlem kind of area. The songs are different from the original film, but the 1939 film, and you got some pretty well known names in it. So Diana Ross plays Dorothy. Michael Jackson, go grab your pitchforks and whatever, plays the Scarecrow. You got Nipsey Russell as Tin Man, Ted Ross as the Cowardly Lion, Richard Pryor as the actual wizard himself, Lena Horne as Glinda, the Good Witch of the South, Mabel Kin as a character called Eveline, so with evil in the name, who plays the Wicked Witch of the West. Thelma Carpenter as Miss Swan, the Good Witch of the North, and a bunch of other names I don't know the names of. I think I know Frank Welker as the dog, but anyway. But yeah, it's basically the exact same story, just just with a bit more stuff going for it. So yeah, and honestly, even though I thought it was alright for a film, it's not really my favourite adaptation, because it's very different, and it's very different to what we're used to. And obviously, different is good if it works well, but it doesn't always work well. And no offense to the people involved with the songs and everything, but there is a lot of moments in the film where they take way too long, like unnecessarily long, which is, yeah, it's just the way it is. But interesting that the film was written by the guy that nearly ruined Batman, Joel Schumacher. So The Wiz, even though I thought it was alright, yeah, it's not my favourite. And it could have worked on a bit more. They didn't need to spend way too long on certain bits, but it is what it is. So I'm going to give The Wiz, the film, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 because, yeah, I didn't really like it as much as most people would. So, yeah. Next is The Wizard of Oz from 1982, which is an anime take on the story. So it's 1982 anime feature film directed by, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, Fumihiko Takayama-san, from a screenplay by Akira Miyazaki-san, which obviously is based on the story, and it was distributed by Toho. You know, if you're not familiar with Toho, they're a big Japanese company, well known for Godzilla and everything. And from what I can remember when I saw this, it's pretty much it's not actually, doesn't feel much like anime, I'll be honest. Yeah, there's definitely that anime feel to it because it feels like it's a Dragon Ball Z kind of episode, but all the characters don't have those big the big expressive eyes, apart from Dorothy who has big eyes. Toto looks like the terrier dog from Lady and the Tramp, which I thought was a strange choice, but that's all right. All the characters look like themselves. They're quite well designed. I think the Tin Man looks a bit too big in like that area, but it's all right. So yeah, I think it was a well animated film. I think it's probably not as well known because it's kind of thrown under the shadow of the MGM film, but for a film made by the good people of Japan, I think it was alright for what it is. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Which leads us nicely onto the Wonderful Wizard of Oz TV series, which I guess is kind of a continuation of the film, because the Tin Man looks the same as he did in that film, but I don't know if that's like a design choice or whatever. Although it doesn't mention anything about Toho, so who knows. But anyway, so this TV series adapts the first four books of the book series with some changes, and it's pretty much a much more fleshed out attempt at adapting the Wonderful Wizard of Oz stories. So it adapts the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the Marvelous Land of Oz, Ozma of Oz, and the Emerald City of Oz, and it's basically what you expect it to be. It's kind of like an anime series that adapts different story arcs, because they're very good at doing that. And each season is adapting one of the stories, which I think is great. But do I remember much from it? Well, as I said, Tin Man looks like the Tin Man from the film I just talked about. Dorothy looks a little different, much more sort of monkey kind of looking, but I don't know if that's a design choice or whatever. It's kind of the sort of series that you could probably put on as like a Saturday morning cartoon for people, because it does kind of has that feel to it. And despite how big each series is, it kind of feels like the stories aren't exactly epic or whatever. There's kind of nice feeling and everything, but there's some good moments in it. So I don't know. I'm gonna give Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the TV series, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. It's not really the sort of show I grew up with, but it's alright for what it was. So bring us on to another Wizard of Oz TV series, this time from 1990, and this time it was produced by Dick Animation City. That's basically one of the big companies that made a lot of Saturday morning cartoons in the 90s. it exists to capitalise on the popularity of the 1939 film, which they had acquired the rights from Turner Entertainment Company. For those who don't know, Turner Entertainment Company is now part of Warner Brothers, and they were the original owners of Cartoon Network and DC Comics before Warner Brothers took over. So this series aired for 13 episodes, and it's basically just basically adventures with the main cast of The Wizard of Oz, albeit with different people voicing the characters, because obviously the original cast is either still alive or no longer with us. And it's pretty much your typical Saturday morning cartoon that basically capitalizes on the success of a big major film. Although this one's a special case because the film had already been released way before that sort of stuff was being aired on TV anyway. But I think re-releases kind of made it popular again. Hence why there's a TV series or two. So for this one, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10 because I didn't really get all that engaged in it, but I can kind of see why people would enjoy it. So yeah. Moving us on to another anime television series, this time The Wonderful Galaxy of Oz. This time we're getting a sort of sci-fi version of the Wizard of Oz story. So we've done the original one, we've done a Motown one, and now we're getting a one that's set in space. So it's a futuristic reimagining of the first book. It's one of those rare cases where, since its original run, has not been rebroadcast in Japan or any other country, and has not received any home media release to the best of our knowledge. So if you want to watch it, it's best you watch it on YouTube, because that's where I found it and others. It did have a sort of 75-minute direct-to-video film which used footage from the first and final few episodes, and yeah, blah 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 blah. Stuff happened, and YouTube now has it on the service and the channel, blah blah blah. But anyway, so it's set in 2060. Whether it will actually be like that in 2060, who knows? I'll be 70 at that point, so if I'm still around by then. So 8-year-old Dorothy and her dog Toto are swept off their home planet of New Kansas in the aftermath of a catastrophic storm. They end up in the Galaxy of Oz, and yeah, it's basically this is the exact same story, but set in space, with space, sci-fi things and everything. Blah. So if you like sci-fi and like the Wizard of Oz, then you're probably going to enjoy this, because I thought it was very enjoyable. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 for this one. Now, you probably are very familiar with the amount of different cartoons or animated shows, whatever you want to call it, that had a sequel series that was basic, or prequel series more specifically, that was about the characters as children. And yes, you are correct in assuming that The Wizard of Oz did have a show with the characters that are basically child versions of the main characters, and this series is known as the Oz Kids. It's basically what you think it is. It's some characters that are basically the characters from the books, but reimagined as child characters. So it's, if you want to figure out where it happens chronologically, you're probably going to have a hard time with that, because it doesn't do a great job of trying to establish where it's set and everything. But you know, it's got a lot of weird, crazy, wacky characters. Including the characters from the original book, albeit as child characters. From what I can remember, I don't think Dorothy at all stars in this, but I guess it kind of leads to Dorothy. I don't know. The episodes are surprisingly long for what is otherwise a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, the last between 40 and 89 minutes, which is a bit strange. And it's interesting that and yeah, it was alright. But yeah, it's basically what you think it is. Wizard of Oz, child characters. So yeah, not going to waste any more time on it. 7 out of 10. Right, so now we come to an attempt by Disney to make an unofficial sequel to the MGM 1939 film, and this is called Return to Oz. You probably are familiar with this one, but in case you're not, it's basically Dorothy returning to Oz when things happen and transpires, and she meets some new crazy wacky characters, as well as the characters from the original story. So we've got the Gnome King, Bellina, TikTok, and various other characters. Tin Man's back, Jack Pumpkinhead's in this. Yeah, it's basically what you think it is. It's an attempt by Disney to capitalise on the success of the MGM film, and not doing a very good job of trying to be a sort of follow-up sequel in their desperate attempts to try and buy the rights to the franchise, which they ultimately didn't do in the end. I do like the designs of different characters in this, but if you're expecting this to be a faithful sequel, you're not going to get it, because, as I said, it's an unofficial sequel, and it's unintentionally scary in places, and it's probably not best suited to be shown to children. And it has, but despite it not being very good, it has received a cult following in later years. And some people say it's more faithful than the 1939 film, I personally disagree, because I think the 1939 film may not be faithful to the books either, but Return to Oz, it is what it is. It exists to give you a darker take on things, and Disney are well known for making a lot of dark takes on things. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, because I did find some enjoyment in it, even if it wasn't as enjoyable as the MGM film. So next we have The Lion of Oz, which is an animated film released in the year 2000, which is basically an origin story for the Cowardly Lion before it became part of Dorothy and gang. So it tells the story of the Cowardly Lion, formerly part of the Ohama Circus, came to be in Oz, and how he stopped the Wicked Witch from the East from getting the Flower of Oz. It is based upon the book from 1995 called The Lion of Oz and the Badge of Courage, by Roger S. Baum, who as I understand it, is the great grandson of Frank Baum, who obviously is the original author of the books. And it was made by Sony, and a company that I've never heard of. And when I saw it, it kind of looked like the sort of film that you could probably watch on children's TV channels, and possibly as a direct-to-home media thing. Because I don't think it was that good. It does sort of look like another film I remember seeing on Cartoon Theatre at one point that had something to do with Oz, but I don't really remember that all that well, and I've been trying to find it in preparation for this video, but unfortunately I ran out of time and I didn't get it in the end. So if I ever do decide to review the Cartoon Theatre, to do a review of that, I will do. But anyway, so Lion of Oz, it is what it is. An origin story for Cowardly Lion. If you want the origin story for Cowardly Lion, you get it here. But it is what it is. So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. So next is the Tin Man miniseries from 2007. So this is a co-production between the RHI Entertainment Company and the Sci-Fi Channel. It was broadcast first in the United States on the Sci-Fi Channel in three parts. I found it on YouTube, and it is what it is. So it stars Zoe Deschanel, who you may know from I think Gossip Girl. I could be wrong about that. I know she's appeared in quite a lot of things. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as well, she was in. Neil McDowell, who anyone who's seen the Arrowverse stuff will know who he is, and he also does a lot of voice work as well. Alan Cumming, you all know who Alan Cumming is. I don't need to explain him to you, but in case you are curious who he is, he played a role in Son of the Mars, which isn't actually a great film, so let's think of something else that he was better in. Yeah, he was Nightcrawler in the X-Men, in one of the X-Men films, and will be, and I've heard he's going to reprise his role in the in Avengers Doomsday. As if I go and see that, well, I don't know if I'm going to see that yet, but anyway. It also has Raul Trujillo, whoever that is, Kathleen Robertson, and another well-known person, Richard Dreyfuss. It's a reimagining of The Wizard of Oz with science fiction and fantasy elements added, focusing on the adventures of a small-town waitress named DG, which presumably means Dorothy Gale, who is pulled into a magical realm called the Oz, ruled by the tyrannical sorceress, Azkadella. Interesting name. Together with her companions Glitch, Ral, and Kane, DG journeys to uncover her memories, find lost connections, and for Azkadelia's plot to trap the Oz in eternal darkness, or OZ, as it says here on Wikipedia. I promise I have seen all these things. I'm not reading Wikipedia because I want to. I'm not reading Wikipedia for the sake of this video. I am reading it just to remind myself what it is and everything. Because I have definitely seen these things, I promise you. So from what I can remember in this mini-series, I thought it was alright. It's a more mature take on the story, and if you want a more mature take on the story, you're probably going to get it just fine here. So yeah, so I'm going to give Tim, although I will say the costumes look great, and I think it does have some good parts to it as well, and I do like the music as well, and the acting and so forth. So I'm going to give the Tin Man mini-series a 7 out of 10. And of course, Tom and Jerry, the legendary cat and mouse duo, did their own take on The Wizard of Oz, and their version is exactly what you think it is. Tom and Jerry is basically the original story of Wizard of Oz, their version is based on the MGM film, and it's told from their perspective. It's basically the MGM Wizard of Oz with Tom and Jerry thrown in just for more laughs, thrills, and everything, up to their usual mischief and everything. So if you want a sort of slightly different take on that particular film version of it, you're probably going to get it here. And yeah, it's good. It's good fun. And there was actually a sequel called Back to Oz, which is where the duo team up with Dorothy and friends as they return to the land of Oz to stop a new villain, the Gnome King, taking over Emerald City. And it was dedicated to the voice artist Joe Aleski, who appears in his final film role, and this was just after he died. So yeah, and I'm just going to have a look at the cast, and yeah, I'm not that familiar with the cast in both these films, but I remember enjoying them, and because I grew up with Tom and Jerry, because my mum had a lot of VHS tapes of Tom and Jerry, I did enjoy these, and it's basically what you expect it to be. Tom and Jerry up to their usual hijinks, Jerry trying to outsmart Tom, Tom trying to outsmart Jerry, and they end up working together. And don't worry, they do not talk in this one, thank God. Yeah, it's what you expect it to be. So I'm going to give Tom and Jerry The Wizard of Oz, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because it's pretty much exactly what you think it is. And I'm going to give Tom and Jerry Back to Oz also a 7 out of 10 because again, it's exactly what you think it is. But good that they tried to do an original story rather than sort of trying to adapt to another book from the series. They just did an original story for Back to Oz. So that's those. Now on to Disney's other Oz film, Oz the Great and Powerful. So this was directed by the Spider-Man director, Sam Raimi, which I did not know until I legit did not know until I literally went on the Wikipedia page right now. It stars James Franco as the titular Oz, the Great and Powerful. Mila Kunis as the Wicked Witch of the West, who in this version is called Fedora. Rachel Watts as Evanora, who's the Wicked Witch of the East. Michelle Williams as Glinda, and a bunch of other names that I probably do know, but I don't know that well. And as usual, as I recall, the guy who's in the Ash vs Evil Dead series, I think makes a cameo in this. I'm not entirely sure, but one of Sam Raimi's tweaks when it comes to things when it comes to his films is that he usually uses the same he usually uses that actor from The Evil Dead in this. But anyway, I don't really remember this that well. It didn't really have much of an impact with me. I'll be honest. I saw it once, left no mark on me. It's not. I wouldn't say it's a terrible film. It's certainly not the sort of film that I would have gone to the cinema to see. In fact, I didn't go to see it at the cinema actually. I only really saw it when when I started collecting Blu-rays and DVDs of films that had these special covers, because at the time Disney were partnering with HMV to release films with a villain cover on them, and I happened to get the one for Oz Great and Powerful. And for what it is, you can kind of get, it's definitely better than Return to Oz if you're thinking of Oz films. But in terms of what it is, I don't think it was that great. It's okay in parts, but Bruce Campbell. That's the name of the Evil Dead guy. That finally got there. But yeah, also Great and Powerful. It's okay, not great, just okay, I'd say. So 6 out of 10 for that one. So next we have the animated TV series that's on Amazon Prime Video, Lost in Oz. So originally this was meant to be just a pilot episode, nothing more. But then it ended up becoming a 2-season series. It's animated well, has a lot of interesting characters. Does sort of play upon the mythology of the Oz franchise at large. And it's not to be confused with Tim Burton's Lost in Oz cancelled TV series, I should say. I do have a few problems with it though. The first of which is that they have characters that do state the obvious like a lot in this, and they always make it a big deal. Oh, you did this, you did that, you did this, you did that, and which I'm grateful that they did tone down in the second season, because it was quite a big thing in the first season. The character designs, I mean, they're not the greatest. Sorry, excuse me. But they're alright for what they are, so yeah, it's a hit or miss kind of thing. I personally thought it was alright with the characters. I think the first season was a lot more serious than the second season, because the second season feels a bit more comedic than the first season, and I think it just really only existed because people watched it and they decided, alright, let's do it with another season, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. But anyway, yeah. It's not. I don't think it's the greatest TV series in the world, and it's definitely not for my age group. But it might be for your age group. If you're able to get over the whole you did this kind of obviously stating the obvious kind of thing. So yeah. So I'm gonna give Lost in Oz a 6 out of 10. It was alright, just not for me. So next is Legends of Oz: Dorothy's Return. So this is based on the 1989 book Dorothy of Oz, and it's once again done by the great grandson of Frank Baum, and it is a film that was created by Summertime Entertainment, and it was the first and only film they made before they shut down due to the film's commercial underperformance. Something you do have to bear in mind is that when a person or a company makes their very first film, their very first film kind of defines them as a company or person or whatever. And the fact that this film was not backed by any major studios out there, it's a clear sign that they didn't think this was going to be very good. But saying that, it does feature a largely all-star cast. So we got Dan Aykroyd, Jim Belushi, Kelsey Grammer, who I don't particularly like because he's a Trump supporter, but there you go. Oliver Platt, Hugh Dancy, Patrick Stewart, Martin Short, and others. And the film is basically another attempt to try and continue the story from where the original Wizard of Oz left off, in which Scarecrow, Lion, and Tin Man attempt to bring Dorothy back to Oz, But this new evil villain called the Jester, who is related to the Wicked Witch, wants to take over Oz because he's a villain and he likes taking over things because that's what villains do usually. The problem I have with this film is that while the characters in Oz look fine, they actually do look well animated and everything. It's the characters in Kansas that I don't particularly like because it's kind of like because the overall the thing is trying to make out that it's trying to sort of have the characters that are not going to be in the film much have just look bland and ugly looking, whereas the characters that have a bit more personality to them have look more cartoonish, like the Jester and his Kansas counterpart. Oh, spoilers! Sorry. Yeah, and Dorothy looks a bit weird. And there's a lot of silly moments in this as well. Like they go to a candy kingdom and one of the main characters is a marshmallow person who just looks hilarious. They go to another kingdom where it's a China kingdom and where everyone's fragile and they can't move very far because otherwise they'll crack. And a tree becomes a boat. Yada yada yada. The reason why I'm giving away spoilers for this film is because there's the high chance that you're not going to watch it. But it's basically a film that existed. It follows a classic plot line of this big evil businessman is trying to take away people's homes because they're wrecked and everything, and he's trying to scan them over and everything. So main character goes on an adventure. She comes back and then tells the person what for, and yada yada yada. You get the idea with that. So yeah, I can kind of see why this film did not do very very well, because they just thought of an idea and then they just didn't went through it. And apparently it was meant to be a franchise. So 2 sequels and a TV series were set to be in the works. And it was likely to go directly to DVD if the films didn't do well, but then they decided to call it quits on everything. And I think it was meant to be this sort of franchise where it will go Legends of Oz such and such, Legends of Oz such and such, like how the X-Men Origins was meant to be Wolverine, then Magneto, and then something else, but then the second X-Men Origins ended up be worked into X-Men First Class. And likewise with the Dark Universe, where the first film was The Mummy, and then they were going to make further films to that, but then they didn't in the end. Yeah, franchise dead on arrival, basically, is what I'm saying. So yeah, so I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. Next up is Ozland. So this one was released in 2014. It's a science fiction drama independent film by people that I've never heard of, but sometimes things that with people you never heard of can turn out to be good. So it's about two men who wander through the fields of an abandoned homes of a post-apocalyptic Kansas, searching for food. They find a copy of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz book and begins to treat the novel as if it was historical non-fiction, using their surroundings as proof. They question whether Ozland is home and blah blah blah. You get the idea with that. I think it just explores the concept of the Wizard of Oz more than the actual story of it, but that's okay, because sometimes it's better to have things that are different. And I do kind of like it when they decide to take something traditional and do something different with it. And clearly this time they did something dramatically different with it, so I will give it that. So Ozland, I will give it an 8 out of 10. Now this next one was weirdly titled, because when I came across it, it was called The Guardians of Oz, but when I actually played it, the title was instead called Wicked Flying Monkeys. And to be honest, I think the Wicked Flying Monkeys title makes more sense, because it's literally about the Wicked Flying Monkeys. So this was made in Spain, as I recall, and it's basically about one of the monkeys who's trying to impress his father and the Wicked Witch of the West, the Wicked Witch of the West, and he ultimately fails, but then decides to turn good and try and get the try and get the broomstick away from the Wicked Witch, because that's the source of her power and everything. So things happen, they transpire. And what I will say is that I actually thought the designs of the characters looked very strange, like they're very widely mouth looking, which I thought was fine for us. And also, I don't know if it's to do with the costumes or whatever, but I do feel some of the female characters in the film are a little sexualized. Like the Wicked Witch has like one of those I forget what the dresses are called, but they're one of those dresses where the shoulders are not covered, which I don't know if that's meant to be sort of make out to be very sexy or whatever, but I wouldn't know. And Glinda also looks a bit odd as well, although she looks much more odder than in Legends of Oz: Dorothy's Return, in which she looks weird and the actress who voiced her sounded very bored. It was like literally reading their script, not really putting any kind of performance whatsoever. But anyway, so Wicked Flying Monkeys, as this film should have been called to begin with, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because I did enjoy it despite my reservations about the animation and choices that were made in that. Unlike this next film called The Steam Engines of Oz, which is from Canada. It's an animated film directed and written by Sean Patrick O'Reilly. The screenplay is based on the graphic novel of the same name, starring the voices of William Shatner, Ron Perlman, Julian Ho, Alicia Bull, and Scott McNeil. So people that you probably do know, but you probably don't want to see in too much stuff because of how they are, especially William Shatner with how he talks. Oh, this will this film did not look like it was made on a very low budget. I really don't think it was that great. I know someone here says that it was fun and exciting with solid character design and compelling stakes, but the animation kind of makes it not great for me, because the Land of Oz is meant to be this big, wonderful, fantastic kind of area, and then the film just makes it just not to be sort of inspiring awe in that. So yeah, but interesting idea though, for sure. So I don't know, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10 for that one. Right, nearly there, we're nearly at the end. So next film is a Netflix film made in Spain called Rainbow. So this was released during the pandemic, 2020. No, not the pandemic, just after the pandemic, 2022. And it's loosely based on The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and I guess you could see it's a reimagining, and not technically a musical film, but it does have a lot of music in it. It's a coming of age story of a teenager called Dora, who, with an extraordinary musical talent, leaving home alongside her dog Toto upon a call with her father Diego, embarking on a journey to, what does that say? Ciudad Capital. Interesting name. Yeah, I played this, and honestly, it kind of looks like it's trying to be one of those stories where this villain person who's very clearly playing a version of the Wicked Witch of the West is making out that Dora's made this murder, and they have to figure out how to move forward with that, with who gets money, whatever, and etc. Yeah, if you're looking for something that's the Wizard of Oz, I think the Wiz probably looks more like the Wizard of Oz than this, which is kind of just trying to be like, it's a reimagining, but not really much of a reimagining, because it's not, kind of tries to be more modern, more LGBTQIA friendly, and etc. And yeah, it's a case of the Wizard of Oz hit wokeism, and the guy that made it just did not do a good job of it. So unfortunately, this is going to get my lowest rating in this video, which is a 3 out of 10. Okay, now we come to the two-part adaptation of the West End, of the sort of stage show production of Wicked, and started to kick things off with obviously the first film called Wicked, or Wicked Part 1. The first one was released in 2024, starring the likes of Jeff Goldblum, Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Jonathan Bailey, Michelle Yeoh, Peter Dinklage, and others. and it's kind of what you think it might be if you've never seen it. It's basically an origin story for Glinda and Elphaba, who kind of sounds like the name of my sister Elspeth, but which my counsellor thought. But anyway, Elphaba is a misunderstood young woman born with green skin who becomes the Wicked Witch of the West. Well, ultimately becomes the Wicked Witch of the West, I guess. And other stuff happens, and it's basically, as I said, it's an origin story for those characters. And this film is the film that does feature the sort of main songs that would end up becoming the themes for both the characters. So obviously for Glinda it's Popular, and for the Wicked Witch of the West is of course Defying Gravity, which is their closing song, because the people who made this film thought that Defying Gravity was already a great song to close upon, so they decided to split it into two parts rather than do a one film adaptation of an otherwise much longer show, which I think is the right thing to do. It was nominated for Best Picture, but to be honest, it's probably just as an excuse by Universal to shoehorn in one last film because they thought it was very good and it was popular, ironically. Wicked, it's okay, not my sort of musical kind of thing, but it was okay for what it is. So I'm going to give the first Wicked film an 8 out of 10. Now, skipping a few things ahead, finally we come to the final film I'm going to talk about today, which is Wicked for Good, or otherwise known as Wicked Part 2, or Wicked 2, whatever you want to call it. So, this film is a continuation of Wicked, which is set some time after the events that transpired in the first film, with Elphaba being branded as the Wicked Witch of the West and is basically a wanted criminal, and Glinda becomes the good fairy, whatever, Glinda the Good, who attempts to sort of keep people's morales up and everything by doing positivity and everything. And this was the only one of the two Wicked films that I saw at the cinema, and I saw it after the dust settled with my friends Clank Zoka, Mr. Dan 1466, and another friend of ours, and 323 Lee 323 I think was with us, but he saw a different film. Mr. Dan 1466 came with us because he loves musicals, doesn't care what they are, he just loves musicals. And me and Clank were just curious because we wanted to see the second part. We had low expectations of it, but we ended up actually enjoying it much more than we realised. So for me, in my case, it's not too over the top, too action packed and everything, but it does feature a lot of big song moments. The second part is a reimagining of the original Wizard of Oz book, and I think both parts were made in an attempt to sort of make the Wicked Witch of the West more relatable and more sympathetic, and they certainly did a good job of that in both parts. But here it's definitely sort of shows more. And it's definitely the better part of the two, which is funny because usually when you get a two-part adaptation of something, it's usually the second part that ends up being the best part of the two. Although sometimes it can be the other way around, or sometimes they can be on par as well. So yeah. Obviously, and I think anytime Jonathan Bailey gets his top off, I'm hoping that's the same person. Yep. Anytime he gets his top off, I'm drooling because, as you all know, I am pansexual, and I do kind of like men who look good, but I also like women who look good as well. So yeah, it is what it is. So yeah, you know. So I'm going to give Wicked for Good a 8 out of 10 as well. And that, at long last, is the end of all those Oz stuff. As I said, I did miss out some intentionally because there's quite a lot that I've not been able to see, play, listen to, and all that. And obviously, I didn't have much time to do everything. I'd love to have talked about everything, but obviously, with all these other videos and all my work commitments and everything that I do, there's only so much time I can allow before I've had enough of it. And I will say, the Steam Engines of Oz, or whatever it's called, was the one that was kind of like the point where I was like, yeah, that's it, I'm done, not doing it anymore. So yeah, but If you like to hear what I think about the other things, sure, I will do another video to talk about the other Oz stuff. So just leave your suggestions in the comments, and I hope to get around to those at some point, but I don't know when. And bear in mind that there's some things that I can access, but not everything. So yeah. But anyway, that's it for this video. I'd love to hear what you think about all the stuff that I've talked about, so fire away in the comments as well with that. But other than that, thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you can, please. If you are new to the channel, I do all sorts of stuff. So I do vlogs like this, usually on the Thursdays, but if it's a review of the latest things, then I tend to do it during the weekend. I also do gaming videos, so I do Let's Plays on a Wednesday of a completely random game. Along a series of videos, usually one video every 2 videos every week of 4 games I'm playing, alternating between at the moment. So at the time of doing this vlog, I'm currently playing Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, Uncharted 4 Thief's End, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Not in that order, but eh. I also do random shorts as well, and all sorts of other stuff too, including videos with friends and other things as well. See you in the next one. Peace to you all. And remember, just because someone is called the Wonderful Wizard of Oz doesn't mean he's actually a wonderful person, or he has magical powers that's able to do stuff. He may end up being as Danny DeVito once said, a fraud. so yeah. And yeah, as I say, if you want to hear my opinions on other Oz stuff, say so in the comments, and I will get around to them at some point. Eventually, I don't know. Some of these films I have reviewed on Letterboxd as well. If you want a more simpler written version of what I've tried to explain in this video. So yeah, all right, toodles.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home.